She boarded the plane quietly, just another black woman finding her seat in coach. To most passengers, she was invisible, dismissed, underestimated, even mocked by those around her. But what none of them knew was that at 30,000 feet, every life on that aircraft would soon depend on her. The moment of truth would come suddenly, in a way no one could predict. And when it did, the world inside that plane would change forever. Because sometimes the hero looks nothing like what people expect. Her name was Maya, a 32-year-old black woman who had spent her life breaking barriers most people never even faced. By profession, she was a decorated Air Force pilot, but to the world around her that morning, she was just another passenger waiting to board a crowded flight. No uniform, no medals, no sign of the extraordinary skill and discipline that defined her career. To most eyes, she was invisible, or worse, underestimated. She had chosen a seat in coach, tucked away near the back, preferring the quiet anonymity of travel. Around her, conversations buzzed with impatience. Business travelers grumbling about delays, first-class passengers demanding attention, and flight attendants weaving through the aisles with practiced smiles. For Maya, it was routine, just another flight on just another day. But even in these ordinary moments, there were reminders of how the world viewed her. A few sideways glances, a couple of passengers whispering when she walked past, the subtle but familiar sting of judgment. It wasn't new, and she had long since learned to ignore it. Still, it lingered like an unwelcome shadow. What no one realized, not the mocking voices in first class, not the people dismissing her in coach, was that before this flight landed, their very survival would rest on her shoulders. The skies ahead held a storm not just of weather but of fate. And Maya, the woman they overlooked, was about to face a test that would change everything. The flight lifted smoothly into the air, engines humming as the city lights faded below. For most passengers, it was a chance to relax. Movies playing, books opening, drinks being served. But for Maya, there was no escaping the quiet tension that had followed her since boarding. She had noticed the glances, the whispers, a man in first class who had smirked, figures when she walked past, the woman beside her clutching her purse a little tighter, as though Maya's presence itself were a threat. It was subtle, the kind of racism that hides behind polite smiles and casual tones, but Maya knew it well. She had carried it through classrooms where teachers doubted her, into cockpits where colleagues underestimated her, and now onto this plane. She was used to being judged before she even spoke. Half an hour into the flight, the calm began to shift. A storm system loomed ahead, tossing the plane into turbulence. Drinks rattled, overhead bins shook, and anxious murmurs filled the cabin. Flight attendants hurriedly strapped in as the captain's voice crackled overhead, assuring everyone it was nothing unusual. But Maya noticed the difference, the uneven tone, the slight hesitation in his words. Then came the moment that froze the cabin in fear. A sharp announcement echoed, "Is there anyone on board with flight experience? We need assistance in the cockpit immediately." Gasps spread through the cabin. Faces turned pale. For a few seconds, there was only stunned silence. Maya's pulse quickened. She knew exactly what those words meant. Something was wrong with the captain. She looked around, waiting for someone else to stand, but no one moved. Businessmen shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Mothers clutched their children, and the mocking voices from earlier fell silent. But when Maya started to rise, the tension shifted again, not toward relief, but toward disbelief. A passenger sneered. "Her? You've got to be kidding." Another muttered, "This isn't the time for games." Even in the face of crisis, their prejudice ran deeper than their fear. The flight attendant, desperate and panicked, didn't hesitate. "Please come with me," she urged. Maya followed, but the murmurs behind her grew louder. "Unbelievable," one man scoffed. "We're trusting her with our lives?" The words stung, but Maya kept moving forward, every step heavier than the last. Inside the cockpit, the scene was worse than she imagined. The captain was slumped, unconscious, his breathing shallow. The co-pilot was frantic, radioing for emergency support, his voice shaking as he tried to manage both the storm and the plane. Relief flickered in his eyes when Maya introduced herself, but even then he hesitated. You're a pilot?" he asked, almost doubting his own ears. "Yes," she said firmly. "United States Air Force, hundreds of hours in combat aircraft. Let me help." The co-pilot stepped aside, but outside the cockpit, she could still feel the weight of doubt pressing in. The eyes of passengers who had dismissed her, now silently praying she could save them. The storm outside roared louder, lightning splitting the sky. Alarms lit up across the control panel. The plane shuddered, dipping violently as passengers screamed in terror. Every second stretched thin, every decision critical, and in that moment Maya knew this was her proving ground. This was the moment when she would either silence the doubts forever or be remembered as the woman they never believed in. The cockpit shook violently as thunder cracked across the sky, the plane lurching downward in a sickening drop. Oxygen masks swung from the ceiling, passengers screamed, and chaos spread like wildfire through the cabin. In the midst of it all, Maya's hands gripped the controls, her mind racing through years of training. She knew exactly what to do, but the weight of doubt, of disbelief, pressed against her harder than the storm itself. Behind the locked door, she could still hear the voices in her head, the ones that had mocked her in school, dismissed her in training, outed her in every room she ever walked into. And now some of those same voices were screaming from Coach, terrified but still unable to trust her. The irony burned. She had trained her whole life for this moment, and still, people couldn't see past the color of her skin. Co-pilot shouted updates, his panic barely controlled. Lightning flashed again, so close it lit the cockpit in a blinding white. Alarms screamed from the control panel. One wrong move and 300 souls would be lost. Maya steadied her breath. He blocked out the fear, the prejudice, the disbelief. None of that mattered now. Mattered was control. What mattered was proving, to them and to herself, she was more than the box the world had forced her into. Plane pitched hard, nearly rolling sideways. For a split second, silence gripped the cabin as gravity itself seemed to vanish. With every ounce of skill and resolve, Maya pulled against the storm, forcing the aircraft back on course. Arms ached. Sweat poured. Alarms still blared. Slowly, the nose began to lift. Impossible fight wasn't over, but for the first time, hope flickered inside the storm. And in that fragile moment, truth rang louder than the thunder outside. If they survived, it would be because of the black woman they never believed in. Storm finally broke. Plane steadied against the night sky. Cabin, moments before filled with screams, now sat in stunned silence. Maya guided the aircraft through the last waves of turbulence until the ground crew confirmed what everyone longed to hear. Safe. The wheels touched down. Applause erupted. A casual kind that sometimes greets a smooth landing, but a desperate, almost tearful gratitude from people who had stared death in the face. A moment that had once judged her now stared in awe. Maya felt no satisfaction in their sudden change. She hadn't flown to prove herself to them. Flown because lives were at stake. She knew her worth even if the world didn't. Oh, the irony was bitter. At the edge of disaster did they finally believe in her. Passengers filed out, whispers spread about the black woman in coach who had saved them all. Maya, it was never just about this flight. About every moment leading up to it. Door closed in her face, every doubt cast on her ability. Stereotype she had been forced to carry. It wasn't just her story. It was the story of countless others, overlooked, underestimated, and dismissed until crisis forced the world to see their true strength. The question remains, why must black excellence always be proven in the fire of survival before it is recognized? Many more lives must hang in the balance before respect comes freely. Conditions, because in the end, Maya didn't just save a plane. She exposed a truth too many would rather ignore until it's too late.